being that you pay up front to support the farmer's upfront expenses, uh,
So
and then
it's
guaranteeing that income.
so it's similar to a farmer's co-op.
Same kind of concept. Yeah, co-op is another term that's commonly used to describe this. But the idea is that what we're combining is that kind of model where you're paying in order to get produce throughout the season. So you're helping us by covering some of that upfront cost that is involved in agriculture, right? De-risking it for us. We know that the customer is going to buy the produce once we produce the produce, right? Because we already have the money up front. And what that allows us to do is tailor the program more effectively so we can grow specific varieties. We know how much we need to produce. And we're combining that subscription with urban farming, and not just an urban farm, but small scale micro farming, micro growing, where you work with single to two family homes, right? Backyards in North Hartford, as well as community gardens, to create a pretty dense network of small scale farmers, which we will then provide at market access to. So we will pay them for their produce that we then feed into the CSA. The CSA pickups are in Hartford, but they're also in places like West Hartford, right? A wealthier market that is kind of denied urban growers, right? So urban growers are stuck usually with that urban market. And so in Hartford, for example, you may have the best tomatoes in the city, or even are in the state, but you can't get access to the market. And so what we're aiming to do is kind of break those market barriers down and provide small scale farmers that competitive edge and that market access that they kind of consistently don't have access to. So micro scale farmers plus hydroponic technology, which allows them to spend less time, but create more value per square foot in their systems, and create that sustainable farming practices that are so important these days. And then the CSA, so supporting getting wealthier communities, right? So exterior suburban and urban communities to support creating a sustainable food system within the city of Hartford. So it's a really exciting program. It's really the combination has never been, as far as we can tell, has never really been done before, right? Across the country. There's each component has, right? Household co-op based farming is not new, hydroponics is not new, and CSAs are not new, but in combination, this is really a new approach to urban farming and a new approach to getting local produce. And I think one of the things that is really telling is if you look at the produce in the store today and you look at all the gas shortages, right? The price of produce, everything is getting more expensive. And it's really been demonstrated that this food chain that we have is really unreliable, particularly in times of stress. And so what we're trying to build is a super sustainable local approach to agriculture. So if you're in the state of Connecticut, there's no reason you should be buying a tomato from Latin America if you've got tomatoes grown right here locally by people on the ground, right? So that's really the program that we're building.
Now, I've seen a number of farmers lately talking about the fact that the high fuel costs is also raising the cost of fertilizer, the nitrates, all of that. How does that affect hydroponics?
Well, so it does play a small role in our system cost, but what is really important about hydroponics is that it's so efficient, right? So it uses so little fertilizer that the amount of cost, even if the price of our fertilizer were to double, it's not ideal. We don't want it, but that's still a very small amount of operating cost. So we can still operate at much more effective rates than, say, a traditional farm that uses lots and lots of nitrate-based fertilizers. So even though we are still using fertilizer in our systems, it's such a small amount that even the cost rising, it doesn't really affect our bottom line as much.
So it's a much more efficient way of growing. Why do you think it hasn't taken off more than it has?
Well, in a lot of ways, it's a complicated question. There's a lot of different factors. Commercial hydroponics is a really expensive way of growing. And it's very capital intensive, right? Most of the time it's done inside. So you've got to power lights, you got to control the temperature. And so it becomes a very expensive way to grow. And particularly in the United States, where water is not yet properly priced, is what we say. So we still subsidize water for our agricultural sector. And so when water is not that expensive, hydroponics' value is less, particularly if you're talking about California tomatoes, right? Those are grown in massive fields where they dump tons of water at a very low cost. And so it's very hard for a hydroponic producer at scale to compete with that. So that's one of the factors here in the United States. It's increasingly popular around the world in arid regions. So the Middle East in particular, at Northern Africa, you have increasingly amounts of investment in hydroponic technology. I was just in Jordan in November doing some market research for our systems there, and they are increasingly adopting the technology because of their lack of water. So we will see in the next decade a lot of adoption of hydroponic technology as water scarcity becomes a bigger and bigger issue. But up until this to date, it has just not been a big enough issue that you've seen that investment in the new technology change from the
Right.
current practice.
The pain point hasn't been high enough to get people to move in that direction.
Right. Right. And simplified hydroponics has really just not been adopted, right? Which is what we do. So it hasn't been used at scale. It's been used all over the world and tested out all over the world. But if you talk about Haiti, we are one of the few hydroponic producers in the entire country, despite the fact that it kind of solves those two main pain points in Haiti: lack of irrigation and a lack of quality arable land, right, soil. So it would be interesting to see as this technology continues to be proven out as very effective as a solution, what that does, what countries, particularly in these water poor regions, do to adopt it.
No, I think a big part of it here too is just the general awareness, the education on this. I mean, until I met your dad, obviously it's natural that something like this would be going on, but I knew nothing about it. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there like me. And so you're getting out there and educating people, number one, as to what it is. And then number two, you know, if it's really expensive to do it commercially, the fact that you have your little units and whatever, and it's very inexpensive to do and for people to use and so on and so forth. To me, it's the awareness factor, just getting the word out that it's there is going to be huge. And, you know, I think obviously that's something that you're working on. And I think that's going to catch on more and more and more. So it all starts with awareness.
Now, also, given a lot of the difficulties that Haiti has had, they've got a lot of problems with the water that they do have being contaminated because of natural disasters, other problems. I would think that your simplified hydroponic system also creates a much safer food chain for them.
In a manner of speaking, it does. There's one of the things that it does, it's more about the soil than it is about the water, right? Because we're still going to use, one of the interesting things in Haiti is that there actually is enough water in terms of aquifer. There's an aquifer, but too few residents of that country have access to that aquifer through wells. So it's less about the quality of the water that we're putting into the system, than that we are putting less of it in so they can use that higher quality water from the wells, because they don't need to. If you're trying to pull from a well and you're doing it with 5-gallon pails, you're just not going to be able to do traditional agriculture. It just takes too much water. But in our systems, you can do that. And then the second thing is that it removes it from the soil, where a whole lot of soil-borne disease is spread. So you're minimizing those risks. So in terms of the production chain, you are minimizing the risk, but maybe not as much, or in the ways that you would think you would.
Excellent. So, again, where do you see this going down the road? Where would you like to take this?
Oh, that's a fun question right there. There's a lot of different directions. We're very excited about the potential of simplified hydroponics in the developing world, in water scarce regions, in kind of emergency situations, right? So hydroponics has the opportunity where you can set one of these systems up, and within a month, you're producing fresh produce right out of the system, right? And so if you imagine, and they're very inexpensive to set up, really easy to set up. And so if you imagine, for example, hurricane strikes the island of Haiti, right? So that could wipe out agriculture in that area that it got hit for potentially years. So what you would do is that you bring in, let's say, a month's worth of food supplies, but you also bring in hydroponic systems, right? And you set those up and you do some training. And then within a couple months, you have a permanent, right? Not just a short term, right, within a month, but a permanent source of produce and healthy and access to produce in that region. So we can use this as not only a short term disaster relief tool, but also a permanent source of fresh produce, vital produce, environmentally sustainable produce right in these communities that have been decimated. And so it's a very, very effective tool that we can use all around the world as we see these growing conflicts and growing levels of food insecurity all around the world. So that's a really exciting thing because we're kind of on the cutting edge of simplified hydroponics, right? So we're one of those few organizations that's starting to scale this technology, this simplified technology. So it's exciting, and we expect to continue to grow that impact. We're really scaling up our impact in Haiti. And so it creates an opportunity for us to be kind of the leading organization in this space where large organizations can come to us, aid organizations can come to us to source hydroponics and programs. And so we're looking to build out that sector, and we're ramping up our work in Haiti to thousands of families in the next 18 months. And then here in the U.S., we're excited and we expect to really continue to build out these more sustainable business models, right? So it's not just the sale of the technology like in Haiti or around, but it's actually the business models that we build around it. So the CSA subscription we see as this opportunity for us to not only provide access between, for example, Hartford and West Hartford and Avon and Simsbury, this channel of produce, but also connect Hartford entrepreneurs and Hartford business people and Hartford community members with the surrounding suburban and urban communities around Hartford, and then build that model, right, of this connection of both produce and products and opportunities and resources, but also copy that and scale that around. We're also, we're expanding in the education space and building systems for schools and doing training with schools. We'll be in Groton public schools this year. We're out on the eastern part of the state and expanding our educational programs at EastCon as well as in Wyndham. So we're branching out in a lot of different ways, but I think the two major programs that we're most excited about is that simplified hydroponics in countries like Haiti that will have huge impacts around the world, but also here in the US, those business models that we're establishing around simplified hydroponics.
Yeah, I think that the best way to think about it is that with the work that we've been doing in particularly in Haiti and then particularly in Hartford, Connecticut, what we've done is we've over the last handful of years we've been testing all the various components, and what we've established is two templates that we can put in any community thereafter that fits those criteria. So either a developing economy or an under-resourced community in the United States or in a developed country. So we have these templates that we sort of drop into any community across, and what we think we can accomplish is having a networked community set of hyper-local community solutions. And that's the networked piece, right? There's plenty of hyper-local stuff going on nowadays, and there's plenty of sort of large-scale things being attempted, but the connection between the connection between hyper-local activities, resourcing those things, that's the thing that I think that we all over the long run will be able to really generate. And that the community supported agriculture in Hartford is a sustainable model, right? It's a business model. It's not a handout. People are contributing to their own success. People are buying, we're providing a market for people to get the produce that they would buy anyway. Right, and they just do it locally, and you have all these other extra bottom lines. So that template, I think, is where it's headed from here.
That is fantastic, and we are just about at the end of our time. So if our listeners want to get more information, how can they find out more?
So our website is Levo, Levo International.org. And that's probably the best place to go. That's our website, levointernational.org. And you can also check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Our username is just Levo, Levo International.
Excellent. So thanks so much for being with us. Chip, what do you think is the big